So you talked about bush vines, and you have a lot of vines that were planted in the 60s. Why is that different?
There's, in terms of, if we look at logistics first, in terms of number of plants per hectare. On a traditional bush vineyard, you have 1,200 plants per hectare versus maybe up to 10,000 or 15,000 that you may have in certain places in Europe when they're trellis conducted. So you have less number of plants on the same space. So the production that you have per hectare is always lower, basically, because just of mathematics. You have less plants. How does that affect? That affects the vineyard per se, because when you don't have as many plants competing with each other, the bush vines can have more space to expand their roots and go down to get water and nutrients from underground aquifers. Versus when you have trellis conducted vineyards, imagine, these are all one plants after the other. The roots don't have enough space to, expand themselves because they are very close together and they're very superficial. So the way things are going right now with the climate, where we have less water, where we have, extreme weather, all of a sudden, in different times of the year, it's either much warmer than it used to be, or it's either much colder than it used to be, or it's either much rainier, or those things that today it's very difficult to predict. The old bush vine radicular training or root system is very, very interesting. Problem is that obviously it's very labor intensive because everything has to be manual. You have to manually prune, you have to hand harvest, everything is manual. And the way many economies are going, in all over the world, it's very difficult to find workers these days. So the younger generations, or whoever decides to plant a new vineyard these days that does not have their own processing plant would never plant bush any longer. But for me, if you really think about not mass productive agriculture, and it's a way to. They are much more resilient with how the climate is going. But
when you replant, are you replanting as bush vines?
Yeah.
And what percentage of your vines are the original 1960s, 70s plantings?
We have almost 35 hectares, 40 hectares of vineyard, of which like almost 20. So it's like half. Half is bush vine and half is trellis conducted.
And the trellis vineyards, like when you need to replant them in the future, do you think you'll probably go into like bush vines for those?
No, I don't think so. I don't know, because those are trellis conducted, and it would be too expensive to basically.
You're replacing one at a time.
Yeah. So yeah.
So trellis vineyards.
And for me, it's also enriching to have both, because having a trellis conducted vineyard, you cannot plant everything bush.
Yeah.
Not all the grape varieties can be planted bush.
So do you just have less density then in your trellis?
We have, instead of in my region, you go from a bush vine, which is 1,200, to trellis, which is 2,200. But still, if you compare it to other places in Germany,
like 10,000.
it's still very little.
Still very little.
Yeah.